Before you try to change your income, your habits, or your circumstances, you must first confront the one place where every victory and every defeat begins: your mind. You don't wake up one day living a small life by accident. It happens quietly, thought by thought, day by day, until limitation feels normal and doubt feels reasonable. Negative thinking is not dramatic, it's subtle. It disguises itself as realism, caution, and past experience. It whispers that you should lower your expectations, protect yourself, and stop trying so hard. And if you listen long enough, you won't even realize it's costing you your future. The truth is simple, but uncomfortable. The greatest enemy you will ever face is not outside you. It's the voice inside that tells you what you cannot do, who you cannot become, and why now is not the right time. Kill that voice, and everything changes. Let it live, and it will quietly design a life far smaller than your potential. Most people spend their lives trying to change results without ever touching the cause. They work harder, wait longer, hope more, and pray for different outcomes. Yet the same patterns repeat year after year. The missing link is almost always the same thinking. Your life is not shaped first by your circumstances, your education, or your connections. It is shaped by the dominant thoughts you allow to live in your mind. Long before results show up on the outside, they are rehearsed quietly on the inside. Every achievement, every disappointment, every breakthrough, and every regret begins as a thought that was repeated often enough to become familiar. Familiar thoughts turn into attitudes. Attitudes guide decisions, and decisions eventually produce a lifestyle. That is why changing thinking is not a motivational exercise. It is a life-altering discipline. If you don't take control of the way you think, you will eventually live inside the limits your unchecked thoughts create. Negative thinking rarely announces itself as an enemy. It doesn't usually appear as a dramatic statement like, "I will fail." Instead, it shows up disguised as realism, caution, or past experience. It says things like, "This probably won't work," or "People like me don't succeed," or "I tried before, and it didn't go well." These thoughts feel reasonable, even intelligent, which is why they are so dangerous. Over time, they lower expectations. Lower expectations reduce effort. Reduced effort guarantees poor results. Then those poor results are used as evidence that the negative thinking was correct all along. This is how people slowly talk themselves into smaller lives, without ever realizing they are the ones holding the conversation. No one is born with a habit of negative thinking. It is practiced. It is learned through repetition, observation, and environment. A child is not born believing they are incapable. They are taught that belief by repeated messages, experiences, and interpretations. Adults continue the process on their own by replaying failures, magnifying setbacks, and giving more attention to what went wrong than to what is possible. Over time, the mind becomes conditioned to expect disappointment, and expectation quietly directs behavior. When you expect little, you prepare little. When you prepare little, you receive little. This cycle has nothing to do with intelligence or talent. It has everything to do with mental conditioning. What makes negative thinking especially destructive is that it feels passive. People believe they are simply reacting to life, not realizing they are actively training their minds every day. Each time you dwell on what you lack, you reinforce scarcity. Each time you replay a mistake without extracting a lesson, you reinforce regret. Each time you speak doubt out loud, you give it authority. Thinking is not neutral. Every thought is either building you or breaking you, preparing you or weakening you, expanding your vision or shrinking it. The mind does not stay empty. If you don't choose what fills it, it will be filled by default. One of the greatest misunderstandings in personal development is the belief that negative thinking is the result of failure. People say, "I think this way because life has been hard," or "Anyone in my situation would feel this way." But failure does not create negative thinking. Negative thinking creates failure. Long before the results collapsed, the thinking did. Long before effort disappeared, belief weakened. Long before opportunity was missed, doubt spoke louder than desire. Two people can experience the same setback, the same economy, the same rejection, and produce completely different outcomes. One uses the experience as fuel, the other uses it as proof that trying is pointless. The difference is not circumstance, it is interpretation. When effort is fueled by belief, it becomes consistent. When belief is poisoned by negativity, effort becomes sporadic or disappears entirely. This is why negative thinking is so costly. It doesn't just affect mood, it affects action. It doesn't just affect confidence, it affects persistence. And because success is rarely the result of one dramatic action, but rather the accumulation of small, repeated efforts, negative thinking quietly destroys success by interrupting consistency. People don't fail because they are incapable. They fail because they stop showing up with the same intensity and expectation. The mind always looks for evidence to support what it already believes. If you believe you are unlucky, you will notice every inconvenience and ignore every opportunity. If you believe success is reserved for others, you will dismiss possibilities before they have a chance to develop. This is why thinking must be challenged deliberately. If you don't question your thoughts, they will question your potential. Not every thought you have is true, helpful, or worthy of your attention. Many thoughts are simply habits that have never been interrupted. This is where discipline enters the conversation. Motivation is emotional, discipline is deliberate. Motivation comes and goes, but discipline stays when emotions change. Killing negative thinking does not require you to feel confident or inspired. It requires you to choose better thoughts, even when your feelings argue against you. Discipline is the ability to say, "This thought may feel real, but it is not useful." You cannot always control what enters your mind, but you can control what you allow to stay. A negative thought can knock on the door, but discipline decides whether it is invited inside. The mind works much like a muscle. Whatever you exercise grows stronger. If you repeatedly rehearse fear, fear becomes your default response. If you repeatedly rehearse possibility, confidence begins to emerge. Discipline in thinking is not about forcing positivity. It is about choosing thoughts that lead to constructive action. Saying, "Everything is perfect," when it isn't, is not discipline, it's denial. Discipline says, "This is difficult, but I am capable of learning, adjusting, and continuing." It acknowledges reality without surrendering identity. One of the most practical ways to practice disciplined thinking is through language. The words you use internally shape the emotions you feel, and emotions influence behavior. When you say, "I can't," your mind stops searching. When you say, "How can I?" your mind engages. Small shifts in language can produce dramatic shifts in direction. Replacing defeat-oriented language with growth-oriented language is not a motivational trick, it is a strategic decision. Language is the interface between thought and action. Your environment plays a powerful role in shaping your thinking, whether you are aware of it or not. The people you spend time with, the content you consume, and the conversations you tolerate all contribute to your mental atmosphere. If you are constantly surrounded by complaining, pessimism, and excuses, those patterns will eventually sound normal. What sounds normal begins to feel acceptable. What feels acceptable becomes behavior. This is why environment is not just about comfort, it is about influence. You don't need to cut yourself off from the world to improve your thinking, but you do need to be selective. Exposure matters. Repeated exposure matters even more. If you listen to discouraging voices long enough, you will eventually internalize their limits. On the other hand, when you expose yourself consistently to ideas that emphasize growth, responsibility, and possibility, your thinking stretches to match the environment. This is not imitation, it is alignment. Your standards rise when your environment demands more from you. This is why association is such a powerful force. You begin to think differently when you spend time with people who expect more from life and from themselves. Their questions challenge your assumptions. Their habits challenge your excuses. Their results challenge your beliefs. Over time, you either rise to the level of your environment or retreat to one that matches your comfort zone. Growth requires friction, and the right environment provides it. Negative thinking thrives in isolation. When thoughts are never spoken, challenged, or examined, they grow unchecked. Exposure to new perspectives disrupts mental ruts. It reminds you that your current way of thinking is not the only way to think. This is why reading, listening, and learning are not optional activities for personal growth, they are necessities. Education is not about gathering facts, it is about upgrading interpretation. Another critical factor in eliminating negative thinking is understanding the power of internal dialogue. You are always talking to yourself, whether you are aware of it or not. That conversation shapes how you interpret events, how you evaluate yourself, and how you approach the future. If your inner dialogue is harsh, limiting, or defeatist, it will eventually erode confidence and initiative. You cannot consistently act with courage while constantly speaking to yourself with doubt. The way you speak to yourself matters more than how others speak to you. External criticism can be filtered and rejected, but internal criticism is often accepted without question. When you repeatedly tell yourself that you are behind, not good enough, or incapable, you create emotional resistance to effort. Why try if the verdict is already decided? This is why changing internal dialogue is not about self-flattery, it is about fairness. Speak to yourself with the same clarity, honesty, and encouragement you would offer someone you care about. Replacing negative internal dialogue does not mean ignoring mistakes. It means framing them correctly. A mistake is not evidence of failure, it is feedback. Feedback informs adjustment. Adjustment leads to improvement. When mistakes are treated as character judgments, growth stops. When they are treated as information, progress accelerates. The difference lies entirely in interpretation. The future you experience will largely be determined by the conversations you have with yourself today. Thoughts repeated become beliefs. Beliefs shape decisions. Decisions compound over time. This process is slow enough that people rarely notice it happening, but powerful enough to determine the direction of a lifetime. Small changes in thinking, practiced daily, produce massive changes in results over the years. Killing negative thinking is not a one-time event, it is a daily practice. The mind requires maintenance just like the body. If you neglect it, weakness sets in. If you train it, strength develops. Each day presents opportunities to either reinforce old patterns or install better ones. The choice is subtle, but the consequences are significant. You do not need to wait for perfect conditions to begin changing your thinking. You do not need permission, approval, or external validation. The moment you decide to take responsibility for your thoughts, you begin taking responsibility for your life. Responsibility is not blame, it is power. The moment you accept that your thinking influences your results, you gain the ability to influence your future. Negative thinking survives on autopilot. Positive, disciplined thinking requires intention. Intention requires awareness. Awareness begins with observation. Pay attention to what you think when things go wrong. Pay attention to the stories you tell yourself about delays, setbacks, and challenges. Those stories are either building resilience or rehearsing defeat. As you become more aware, you gain more choice. As you gain more choice, you gain more control. Control over thinking leads to control over behavior. Control over behavior leads to improved results. Improved results reinforce better thinking. This upward cycle is available to anyone willing to practice it, regardless of background, education, or past experience. Your past does not disqualify you, it educates you. Your current limitations do not define you, they invite growth. Negative thinking wants to freeze you in time, to convince you that who you were is who you must remain. Disciplined thinking recognizes that change is not only possible, it is natural when effort is applied consistently. The quality of your thinking determines the quality of your questions. The quality of your questions determines the quality of your answers, and the quality of your answers determines the quality of your actions. This chain reaction is always at work, whether you guide it or ignore it. When you guide it deliberately, progress becomes predictable. Every improvement in life begins with a shift in perspective. Not a dramatic shift, but a steady one. Not overnight transformation, but daily alignment. Negative thinking loses power, not when you fight it emotionally, but when you replace it systematically. Better thoughts, chosen repeatedly, eventually become your new normal. You don't need to become someone else to eliminate negative thinking. You need to remove the habits of thought that no longer serve you. As those habits weaken, your natural capacity for growth, creativity, and resilience begins to surface. What remains is not a new identity, but a clearer expression of your potential. The moment you take your thinking seriously, life begins to take you seriously as well.